Good afternoon. I'm Sharon Sobol Jordan, President and CEO of the United Way of Greater Cleveland. Welcome to the first session of our 2024 Community Conversations series. These conversations provide a forum to raise awareness and increase engagement on important topics in our community. Each of our voices matters and has the power to create change. I would like to thank Ideastream Public Media for moderating today's session. I would also like to thank WOVU for simulcasting this afternoon's discussion live on 95.9 FM. And thank you to our sponsor, Rockwell Automation, for their financial support of this series, and our community partners for their support as well. Today's topic is Imagining a New Path to Prosperity in Cleveland, Universal Basic Employment. Numerous government programs are designed to provide direct assistance to those of us experiencing poverty. In fact, the federal government spends nearly $900 billion annually on this social safety net. However, according to United Way's 2023 Community Needs Assessment, Cleveland remains the second poorest large city in the United States, and approximately 207,000 individuals live below the poverty level in Cuyahoga County. Cleveland City Council recently introduced legislation to fund a 2-year research and development phase for a promising new approach called Universal Basic Employment. If passed, the funding will support further exploration of a pilot program by Devin Cotten, CEO of Universal Basic Employment, in partnership with United Way of Greater Cleveland. Supporting innovative ideas like Universal Basic Employment is how we here at United Way of Greater Cleveland are working with others to make income and wealth building possible for all of us. To lead today's discussion, we are so pleased to have Abbey Marshall as our moderator. Abbey is a government reporter and producer for Ideastream Public Media, where she covers Cleveland area government and politics. A Cincinnati native and an Ohio University graduate, Abbey moved to Northeast Ohio as a Report for America Fellow. She then joined the Akron Beacon Journal as its city government reporter. Abbey has reported on a variety of issues, including housing and police reform. And with that, I will turn it over to Abbey to begin today's conversation.
Thank you, Sharon, for the introduction, and thank you, United Way of Greater Cleveland, for hosting this series of events and inviting me to moderate this critical discussion. We also want to thank Ideastream Public Media and WOVU 95.9 FM, who will be streaming today's conversation. So that everyone understands how we will interact as a community today, we will begin with questions that I prepared for today's conversation. There will be a public question and answer segment at approximately 12:40 p.m. when questions from the community will be shared with our panel. You may start asking questions at any time, and we will make every attempt to get all questions answered. You can text those questions to 216-307-5632, or if you're listening on Zoom, you can type them into the Q&A box. At this time, I would like to introduce our panel of experts. Emily Campbell, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Center for Community Solutions, oversees research, policy, and administration-related activities. Emily previously worked for a U.S. congressman, and she has consulted with numerous nonprofits, foundations, government agencies to provide data and public policy decision support. Her work on poverty has appeared in every major newspaper in Ohio, and she has been interviewed by a wide variety of media outlets, including The Economist, The New York Times, ESPN.com, MSNBC, and NPR. Devin Cotten, founder and CEO of Universal Basic Employment. Devin is a community and economic development professional who has spent the majority of his career serving Cleveland's most disinvested communities. He specializes in finding wins at the intersection of people, processes, and data. Devin has held positions on regional policy coalitions and resident-led task forces and spearheaded work that bridged the gap between community and institutions to drive people-centric systems change. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today's conversation. Let's start by just setting the stage.
Yes.
Devin, can you talk a little bit about what UBE is?
Yeah, no, appreciate that, Abbey, and thank you for the United Way for having us here today. And have this conversation about, creating better economic guarantees in our country. So what is UBE? It's a public policy initiative with the mission to demonstrate that federal jobs guarantee policy can eliminate poverty and be a stop payment on its many symptoms. We do this by subsidizing the employment for 100 under and unemployed Clevelanders over 3 years to show that it's a simultaneous investment in people, place, and business. So UBE imagines a world where a mother with 2 kids can walk down the street and work at her local church, designated as the after-school bus drop-off for her kids. They can finish their homework in their pews of the church, and they can walk back home to a home that she's able to qualify for a mortgage and that she can own. And then what does it actually look like? Exactly, it looks like the graphic that we're showing here. ABC Bakery is going to need to employ 5 individuals, so that they will receive a $250,000 subsidy to employ the 5 individuals at $50,000 a year. And what that subsidy does, it solves the symptoms of poverty that show up in the workplace. So symptoms like employee turnover, call-offs due to not having childcare or poor transportation in place, employee engagement that we're seeing right now due to wages, and then also solving the symptoms of poverty that show up in the individual's lives, and then again simultaneously showing up for the symptoms of poverty that show up in the community. Now that someone that can qualify for a mortgage, have the time to be an engaged community partner, engage in community engagement, our democracy, and things like that. So it's a simultaneous investment as we look at this triple bottom line of if we subsidize people by way of work, what would that mean to impact people, place, and business?
And so can we talk a little bit about what problem this is solving? So Emily, can you speak about the current state of poverty here in Cleveland?
Absolutely. At the Center for Community Solutions, we spend a lot of our time looking at poverty, its causes, its consequences, its symptoms, many of which Devin mentioned. And what we see is that year after year, Cleveland is there on the list as the second poorest large city in the United States. Detroit is just a little worse than us, but we don't want to be on that list. And what we see is that over time, poverty has become concentrated in Cleveland. As Sharon mentioned, there are 207,000 Cuyahoga County residents. About 112,000 of those people live in Cleveland. And so in 1965, when the war on poverty began, when we had got modern measures of poverty, there were about 800,000 people that lived in Cleveland. Today, there's 360,000. The number of people who live in Cleveland has dropped, as you could see on the chart, but the number of people living in poverty has remained relatively steady. So what's happened is that poverty has become concentrated. And so today, Cleveland, unfortunately, is a high poverty city. And the way that someone is identified as living in poverty or not for these official statistics is based solely on their household income, the amount of money that they and their family members are earning. There's a threshold set by the federal government every year. It's updated for inflation every year and nothing else. If you earn more than that, you're above poverty. Everyone in your family and your household is above poverty. If you earn less, everyone is below poverty. And we know that those poverty thresholds do not reflect what a family would need to get by without additional resources, help from government, from philanthropy, from friends and family, from charity. So the federal poverty threshold for a family of 3 is about $25,000 or $26,000 a year. MIT says that a living wage for a family of 3 with 2 young children paying for full-time childcare would be about $80,000 a year. So a big distance to go between even being over that poverty threshold and really thriving as a family.
Right. It seems like a very insurmountable problem, and we're talking about this new creative solution potentially. But Emily, what is the landscape currently for folks that are living in poverty? What assistance, public assistance, already exists?
Sure. So, I used to think that poverty was a very complex issue. What I've come to realize is that it's not. It's really very simple. It's about resources and financial resources specifically for families. And so when a family doesn't have enough to be able to make their ends meet, they rely on a number of other programs to help them get by. Things like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, for food, Medicaid for health insurance coverage, publicly subsidized childcare, all these other programs and systems that we've built up around to try and address what is fundamentally an economic issue for families.
Right. And how is UBE different from the programs that Emily just mentioned, Devin?
Yeah, and the purpose, those programs have been around, they're legacy programs, and they serve their purpose of, helping people in dire straits in certain situations. But the fundamental difference between UBE and those programs is the agency that we can bring back to those nearly 112,000 Clevelanders that are currently living in poverty. So an earned income is the gold standard of agency. Right now, if you were to stack up and use up all social safety net benefits, say you had $1,500 in a housing choice voucher, $500 a month in EBT, cash assistance, TANF, all the other things, if you stack them all up, you can't go to a bank and a mortgage loan officer and say, hey, I have a $50,000 income and qualify for a mortgage to buy your family a house or to get a home loan, to get a car loan to have reliable transportation to get back and forth to work. And so what we're doing is we're examining what would it look like to stand up these programs versus standing up to UBE, of where you can redirect those dollars in a way that restores agency back to people so that they don't have to go through the dehumanizing process of recertifying for their benefits or playing in the benefit cliff game and say like, okay, if I go to work at this subsidized autonomous wage, I have the opportunity to take part and use these private banking tools that you and I and so many other people use every day to make up this bubble of enough to have the agency to navigate the needs and wants that I have in my life.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to remind the audience to text questions to 216-307-5632 as we continue our conversation to get those answered at the end. So, Devin, can you talk a little bit about how UBE addresses the benefits cliff that we were just talking about that impacts workers?
Yeah, so using the Atlanta Federal Reserve's benefit calculator, we can look and see what the quote-unquote autonomous salary is in any county in the country. And what UBE describes as an autonomous salary is a salary that bridges you past the benefit cliff. So that's past the situation where you get hired in at your local dollar store at making $14 an hour when you get first employed, and then you get employed after your 90-day probation, and now you're bumped up to $15 an hour. You recertify for X, Y, and Z benefits, and then all of a sudden now you lose $1,000 in total benefits. Now your EBT card goes from $500 to $250. Now your housing choice voucher goes from your copay of being $600 to now all of a sudden it's $800, or even drastic jumps from $25 to $400 or something like that. So we know the number that bridges folks past that, and that's what we're calling an autonomous salary. And then it's, and additionally to what's an autonomous salary, is that it's the number that gets you the opportunity to use those private banking tools to again navigate your needs and wants, and then also enough of a salary that it warrants an investment for the private sector to come in and solve again those symptoms of poverty, where a internet provider can come in and dig up Kinsman Road and lay fiber optic cables, or a grocer can come in and say, hey, everyone can buy groceries once a week instead of the historical monthly trip that folks use on EBT. And now we can have a normal cash flow for these businesses to come in and invest in communities that have historically been without those resources.
Yeah, and that's something I hear a lot as a local government reporter, is how public investments can lead to private investments. So it's interesting you brought that up. And now, what specific jobs, or are there specific jobs that would benefit from this program, Devin?
Yeah, so UBE is designed to overlay over the existing infrastructure of our Main Street and small business and nonprofit sector. So thinking about your local churches, your local coffee shops, your local tire shops, and jobs like that have the capacity to take on individuals with less employment history than historically and larger institutions are more inclined to take on. Also, they have the ability to take on individuals that may have a felonious background, because they can say, hey, I know you might have had certain things happen in your own personal life, but I do remember your mom and you're a good kid. You know what I mean? So come down here, let me give you an opportunity, and you begin demonstrating that work experience, and you can begin developing that social capital necessary to find the next opportunity. So it's thinking about those historically low wage jobs, those historically jobs that have lacked dignity in the way that employers have had the ability to or chosen to pay for them. but they're so critical to the work, thinking about our STNAs, our home health aide, our direct care workers, our child care workers, these jobs that are critical functions to our community, critical functions to the institutions that employ them, but they necessarily haven't had the wages to back that up.
Sure. So, Emily, now let's talk a little bit about the role that the government would play in setting the wage scale for certain professions. And again, we'll probably go back to Devin to talk a little bit more about how UBE ties into that. But could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I really appreciate that Devin has mentioned the benefit cliff. He's mentioned some of these serving professions, childcare, healthcare. The reality is that those professions are all part of the health and social service safety net, right? So they're an important part of our economy, but they're also an important part of the support system for people. And the reality is that well over 3/4, 80% of the resources for the health and social service system come from government. I mean, government is our largest investor in some of these things. What happens is that in some of these areas, especially when we're thinking about healthcare, we're thinking about childcare, or we're thinking about people that are providing behavioral health, mental health services, their wages are largely set because of government decisions and the provider rates, the reimbursement rates that government is paying to make sure that these services are available in our community. So over the last few years, as larger economic forces have come to play in the labor force, we've seen wages in things like retail service and fast food have increased very quickly. But the wages in some of these serving professions, public serving, community serving professions have been dampened, and it's because the organizations providing those services can't afford to pay their employees anymore because of the government, rates. And so there's an element of all of these conversations where we need to think about the supply and the demand and the economics and get down to the fundamental factors that are influencing community-wide, statewide, even nationwide, and the reasons that we see some underpaid people within our community, and how we can do both programmatic solutions like UBE to address needs for individual families, but also systemic systems to try and address hundreds of thousands of people that are struggling.
Do we have any data on how some of these existing programs work, as well as how UBE can tie into that and maybe be more impactful in some ways?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of data and information collected about what's effective, what are some of the multipliers. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, is a great one. The Department of Agriculture has found that for every $1 in SNAP invested in a community, it generates economic activity of about $7. Wow. There's this local economic activity that's generated by what we often think of as assistance, but it does have an impact in jobs, in farmers, in transportation, in all these sort of industries. But the most effective thing that we've seen in the last few years has been the child tax credit. So the improvements in the child tax credit that were in place in 2021 sent a prepayment of the child tax credit to families. Also improved the benefit. And what we saw is that when those prepayments and when those enhancements were in place, child poverty in this country was cut in half. I think we have a chart that shows some of the data. When they were allowed to expire, it went right back up. And so this direct assistance to families where they can spend the money for whatever their needs are have been shown to be highly effective. And the data from that time shows that families spent their extra dollars or their prepayment of their tax credit on exactly what you would hope, on things like utilities, on food, and back to school time, on clothing, on paying down their debts, on saving for education.
And so that's an example of some current programs that work. How can UBEs be more impactful?
Yeah, and I think what Emily, and so as a person that is doing this work around a jobs guarantee, what I saw from that chart and what I hear from the work that Emily outlined for us is agency. When we give individuals the agency to make decisions and the best decisions for their family and the resources to do that, they make amazing decisions. Mm-hmm. We solve some of the greatest ills and some of the greatest problems that we have in our community, and we see better lives. We see better communities. We see better outcomes for our children. And it's a way for our community and our government to wrap their arms around folks to, again, give them the agency to make those decisions with the exact same amount of money that they're already spending.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to toss out another bid for questions. You can text your questions to 216-307-5632, and we will work to get those answered as we wrap up here. Emily, you talked a little bit about the child tax credit. What other lessons can we see from the pandemic? Because that was a time where people were in a lot of economic strife, but there were a lot of quick government assistance programs that came out. What did we see work? What didn't work? What else did you see in your work during the pandemic?
Absolutely. You know, the pandemic, we know it was a difficult time. We've all just lived through it. A lot of challenges facing individuals and families, but there was an enormous amount of innovation that happened during the pandemic in the provision of public benefits, in trying to get people the help they need when they needed it. You know, we had some of these things, which I sort of think of as an experiment, in increases in unemployment, in the child tax credit. Ohio used every tool in its toolbox to try and ensure that people in our state had the assistance that they needed. Introduced pandemic electronic benefit transfer for kids to be able to get the benefits of free and reduced lunch even if they're not in school, to make sure that we didn't have hungry kids. Allowing people to have their Medicaid health coverage even when they couldn't go to an office for their redetermination or turn in their paperwork. What we've seen is that as those things are rolled back, we go right back to where we were before the pandemic. So we've had this moment of innovation. Almost all of it has expired.
Wow. So we're talking about maybe something that can push forward and continue.
Yeah.
So Devin, abstractly speaking, I guess, why is UBE a great solution for here in Cleveland?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. You know, UBE is a solution for Cleveland because a third of its residents and half of its children live in poverty. Small businesses are struggling and neighborhoods are struggling with the pervasive symptoms of poverty that show up every single day. Until we solve that, you know, no matter what we do, we're still anchored. You know what I mean? If a third of our friends and neighbors and everyone else are still struggling with these realities, you know, but in spite of that, Clevelanders get up every day and go to work. They get up every day and take on the jobs that require them to deal with the benefits cliff. They find a way to do hair on the side, watch someone else's children, you know, find different ways to make things meet because they want to have the opportunity again to chart their own story. So, you know, being able to provide refuge for the effort that people are doing every single day, wrap the arms of the government around their solutions that people are coming up with in their own communities is why this is a great solution for Cleveland, because we have people that are getting up and going to work every day, and how can we support their individual efforts?
Yeah, and now practically speaking, we're talking about a pilot program. Can you kind of get into a little bit of the specifics of what that would look like here in Cleveland?
Yeah, so again, going back to the original graphic, it would look like UBE, in partnership with the United Way, providing a direct subsidy to small businesses so that they can employ our friends and neighbors at an autonomous wage that allows them to dignify the work that they've historically done, and have the agency to go out and build the infrastructure, take advantage of the private banking tools that you and I and many others take advantage of every day to navigate the needs and wants. And over 3 years, we use an evaluation team and partner to demonstrate that, wow, this business made more money because they had a stabilized workforce, an engaged workforce that was able to show up to work on time, use whatever mode of transportation that they needed to do to make that happen. And we can demonstrate that there's wins that can be found here in the business community. And then simultaneously, we can see those wins that happen out in actual neighborhoods. And then we can see those wins that happen in the individual's lives and the lives of their family and their children. And if we calculate and add up all of those wins and the dollars that we spent out to make that happen, we can again stand up UBE versus the current solution that we have for social safety net benefits and see which one has had a greater impact on our communities and people.
And this is legislation that is working its way currently through Cleveland City Council. And when you talk about a pilot program, obviously we're it's a smaller scope. You mentioned about 100 Clevelanders. Yep. What is your ultimate goal and vision for this as it expands and grows, hopefully, in the time of the pilot program?
Yeah, so our ultimate goal and what we consider to be our ultimate resting place is state or federal legislation. You know, we partner with an amazing organization like the United Way because the ultimate goal is for UBE to come into the market, solve this ill of poverty, and then to sunset as an organization. Our goal is not to be around here for 20 years, continue to look at this problem. Our goal is to come to the marketplace, solve this, and sunset. And so, what that looks like is what we're starting here is Cleveland has been the first to do so many things. It's going to be the first to launch a jobs guarantee pilot, first city to launch a jobs guarantee pilot in the nation. And what we're building here is the first piece of a large suite of literature needed to walk across the country and say, this is what the enough salary here is right here in Cuyahoga County, and then this is what the autonomous salary looks like in Cook County. This is what the autonomous salary looks like in King County up there in our friends in Seattle. And so now we can begin putting these pieces together that says, okay, this is what we know to be the autonomous salary at every place in this country. So how do we go about guarantee people when they go to work, they have that much money in their pocket so that they can reinvest in themselves, reinvest in the businesses in their local community, and then reinvest in their community as a whole.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned some other cities that maybe aren't, as worse off as it comes to poverty as Cleveland is, but can UBE work in those places? What does that look like? Yeah. And I'm sure Emily can attest to the fact that poverty exists everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's the cool thing about this solution, that it has the ability to reach the rural destitute poverty that shows up in Appalachia, and then it also has the ability to reach newcomers that are coming into New York and other large cities that are going into work in their communities and trying to find that foothold. Yeah, that's the long-term goal, is that we can examine direct care jobs here in Cleveland, and then we can examine tourism in the Carolinas, and then we can examine, the lower ends of the finance district in New York. And so finding different industries, we can examine what it looks like in the Mississippi Delta for folks that are working in the rural communities or the farming community. What does it look like? Again, finding the autonomous number in all these particular communities and all these jobs that exist in all these communities, and then going out and proving that it's more effective for our government to subsidize the autonomous wages for individuals than it would be for them to currently stand up the social safety net benefits.
And Emily, what is your hope as someone that works in this field every single day that you would like to see come out of a pilot program like this?
Sure, I don't think that it's a sort of either or question. A pilot program like this is serving 100 individuals. I can absolutely see that it would be transformative for those people that it's able to serve. It's not going to move the high level numbers, or at least not anytime soon, right. In terms of where Cleveland and other communities are in terms of poverty. And so, for me, I think that the fastest way for a child to be out of poverty is for their families to earn more. And all of the different things that we can put together to help that are certainly good. And we need these programmatic solutions that are helping individual families, but we also have to be working on systemic solutions and make sure that programs are there for when something happens and someone can't work or they aren't able to take advantage of the program because it's at capacity. So we have to be sure that we are also protecting that safety net while we're working to make sure people don't need it.
So this all sounds wonderful. Do you see any potential problems or issues or anything that might come out of this, or things you might run up against or obstacles?
I'll default to Emily at first because as a person that does this work every day, I struggle to see any idea that giving people the opportunity to chart their own story, to make enough money to navigate their own needs and wants. I struggle with seeing the downside of that.
Mm-hmm. Emily, do you see any potential downsides or obstacles, not even downsides, but obstacles that you might face when implementing a program like this?
Yeah, I think there are always obstacles, right? There's always obstacles to any program, and Devin is such a great advocate for the solution that he's worked hard to bring to Cleveland and to have the innovation happen here in our hometown, which is fantastic. I think It's an expensive program, subsidizing people's wages. There has to be good partnerships with businesses. Not all jobs are quality jobs, and the wage is just one piece of that. And tying things to someone's job, it can sometimes be a challenge. We see some issues in healthcare where people are stuck in jobs that they don't want to stay in because they don't want to give up their health insurance, and sort of doesn't allow people to make necessarily choices for their families. I could see something like this. You're in that job, your wage is being subsidized. It might be difficult. And so I think it is great that it is a pilot program. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. Let's measure it. I can't wait to see what comes out.
Right. And that's the point of a pilot program. We've seen some pilot programs come through Cleveland. For example, Right to Counsel comes to mind, which provides people facing evictions free legal advice and help within that way. So
that's right. It's bringing it to scale.
Yeah,
right?
bringing it to scale, exactly.
And then see if we can bring it to scale.
So speaking of that scale, when you talk about 100 people, how will you go about determining, I guess, who gets to benefit from this in the pilot program, but then I guess beyond that as well?
Yeah, no, this it's fun talking about UBE because we have to simultaneously talk about today and tomorrow. Right. So today, the goal of UBE is to anchor it in a particular neighborhood so that we can see the ripple effects of what it looks like on community engagement, what it looks like on childhood, youth violence and gun violence and things like that. So what does it mean to put 100 save people back into Buckeye, Central, Kinsman, Glenville? Does it change community engagement? Does that reduce youth gun violence? Does it, when you have 100 extra eyes on the street, what does that look like in our community? So we anchor it into a community that is historically low income for all of the myriad of reasons why that community is low income. Find a vibrant enough Main Street in that community and support those small businesses. So picking on Buckeye Road, it's like, okay, Buckeye Road has a number of small businesses that we can go in and elevate the incomes of the individuals that are currently employed there, and probably add a couple employees that live off of Buckeye Road that need the income or that want the opportunity to have the income necessary to work there for 3 years. And then we take those individuals for 3 years and measure out the impact of the triple bottom line that we continuously talk about.
And some of the neighborhoods that you mentioned seem to be Southeast Side, and that's where I know a lot of Mayor Justin Bibb's investment from the federal stimulus dollars are going. So it seems like that is a really targeted area. Why that area specifically?
Yeah, I think to me it's thinking about communities that, again, have the necessary infrastructure with a Main Street that we can point to a number of small businesses, and then simultaneously have enough low-income individuals that have, again, raised their hand every day and go to work. The Mayor Bibb and his administration have been great partners in thinking through and talking through what this work can look like, again, where they're currently making investments on our Southeast side. Again, the Southeast side for our city, as we go through different investments and iteration, has been a part of our community that has been left out. It's so far away from our city center sometimes that it gets often forgot about. But it has a strong history of Black communities that historically are middle class Black communities that have gone in there, built homes, built communities, and built families. So what can it look like to make an investment in those particular neighborhoods that have been forgotten about in so many ways and for so many years?
Well, and Devin didn't say it, but I will. I mean, those are the redlined. Those are the redlined areas of the city that have struggled with historic disinvestment because of racism and racist policies. And so being able to turn the tide on some of those things is going to require investments that other parts of the city have had the opportunity to have over decades, while these parts of the city have been left behind.
Yeah, exactly. Talking about timeline, I mentioned that this is something that's going to go before Cleveland City Council, which is something I cover, so I kind of know that process. But what is the rollout of this going to look like, or what does an ideal timeline look like with this?
Yeah, so what we're in right now in partnership with the United Way of Greater Cleveland is running up through a research and development phase for over the next 18 months. What we're calling is preparing Cleveland to end poverty. So it's getting those small businesses and the pilot participants ready to receive a $15 million investment over the next 3 years. And so we're going to need all 18 months to stand that up. We're also going to need all 18 months to raise the necessary capital to run the $21 million pilot needed to to again demonstrate that Cleveland has the capacity to be a beacon on what it looks like to eliminate poverty. So what we're running up to is a 2026 pilot start. And so in the first quarter of 2026, our goal is to launch this pilot after we've done the necessary work of preparing Clevelanders, preparing Cleveland small businesses, and preparing Cleveland small nonprofits to receive those dollars.
Great. Well, we're going to move to some of the questions that we're getting from the audience. Reminder, you can text questions to 216-307-5632 or put them in the Q&A box if you are joining us via Zoom. So the first question we have is, how does job quality factor into UBE? We talked a little bit about not all jobs are necessarily quality jobs. So how will that factor in here?
Yeah, job quality is huge. And I think part of the reason that some of these jobs are bad jobs is because they don't pay enough.
Right.
And then also one of the requirements is for our small business partners that are receiving the subsidy of the job is that we have a job quality criteria that they need to meet. So yes, we're going to subsidize the wages. So now, because we're subsidizing the wages, we're going to ask you to provide full wraparound benefits, which include, medical, dental, eye, and all those other types of things. Also provide paid leave for individuals so they can take care of their family members. Respect their employees and, provide dignity and agency for them as they go to work, not, require them to do things that are backbreaking and have poor ergonomics and things like that. So it's not just a free ride that, individuals get, small businesses get this money and they can just do whatever with it and be bad actors. Part of what we're course correcting is the opportunity to make higher quality jobs. And then if we're able to do that with the small business and nonprofit community and Main Street environment that we have, how do we, in the long term, as we talk about tomorrow, what does that look like shifting some of these bad jobs and some of these actors? Because if I can go work at my local church and make $50,000, why would I go take this bad job? And
Right.
as we know in the marketplace, now we see some of these bad actors having to change their behaviors. As Emily talked about earlier, if Chipotle raises their wages or some business raises their wages, and all of a sudden employees are switching over to that job, now I have to match that. And you have a marketplace that takes place there. We see UBE creating the floor of what good jobs means in community, and then bad actors having to match what we're providing.
And we did kind of see that in the pandemic too, with wages rising kind of across the board. And some of those jobs that you had mentioned. So a question is, after 3 years of support from the government, what will be the expected salary of the employees?
Yeah, great question. So again, part of the measurement is that we want to be able to demonstrate and want to be able to show. It's been shown time after time that, when you raise the wages of your employees, businesses just flat out do better. They make more money. So if we were able to show with this small diner that, hey, all of a sudden now you're making $400,000 more dollars or $250,000 more dollars or whatever the small business outfit, now we can prove in your books that, hey, you have the ability to pay your employee in your individuals more. From a personal standpoint, UBE is going to provide a number of wraparound supports through education stipend, wraparound supports through social workers, and all these other partners that are going to come in and provide the support to sunset an individual so they can stay at their current employer, so they can leap and find a new job, or they can sunset in a different way as they so choose. But I think one of the most understated things about three individuals after 3 years is that they're going to have so much more social capital than they had starting in this opportunity. So what do they begin to see for their own life and chart out their own course and figure out what looks next? One of the very first things with Councilwoman Howse-Jones, who's a key partner and supporter and thought partner in this work, she was very adamant about that. We can't elevate people up to $50,000 and drop them back down for the sake of research. And so sunsetting is baked heavily into what this pilot looks like. But also, I believe one of the biggest pieces is that people are going to come out of this pilot fundamentally different because of the income that they receive.
And can you talk a little bit about, that's another question in here, in those 3 years, like you said, to avoid that drop back to a worse wage, what kind of skill set building and tools, I guess, that will be provided to the participants to make sure that that doesn't happen?
Yeah, we're going to be a little hands off with that in the sense of prescribing. what skills and tools that people are going to do. What we're going to do is provide the conduit for people to have the stipends and the resources and the scholarships to go re-credential in the way that they decide that is best for them. So, hey, historically I've been an STNA because my cousin was a nurse and she can get me hired in to work at this job. I don't really want to be an STNA, and but I was able to get hired in. Okay, so now you're currently here and you be subsidizing the salary. What do you actually want to do? And how can we help you now that you have a couple of dollars to figure out what that pathway looks like for you in your own personal life?
And I think that, if I can jump in, one of the things is that in order to have that sort of transformation to help people overcome the benefit cliff, the jobs that are paying those wages now are things that often require some pretty significant education, some pretty significant skills and training and experience. And so, one of the questions will be, how do the employers that are employing these folks, how are they able to support the people who work for them, recognizing that maybe at the end of this, that person doesn't work here anymore as they move on to a greater opportunity that isn't part of the program. So I think, there's a lot of, Devin has laid out a great roadmap for what is possible. We'll have to see what happens, but certainly being thoughtful about trying to think about what some of those issues might be to make sure that people don't just head back to where they were 3 years before.
And Emily, one of the questions that we were talking about 100 people. So for the folks that maybe are curious, can you speak to what financial literacy and budgeting resources are available to the community right now?
Yeah, there's a number of financial literacy and budgeting resources available to people. I'll say that I get a little frustrated when we point to that as the answer, because it's not that people aren't spending their dollars in smart ways, it's that they don't have enough money for it to go around. And, I've spent a lot of time researching the benefit cliff, this issue that as you earn more, you may get $1 an hour raise, and it means that you lose a benefit worth hundreds of dollars to your family. It doesn't make economic sense to take more hours or to take the increase. That's smart financial literacy that doesn't get people any closer to being self-sufficient. And so, there are certainly those opportunities available within our community. I'm sure that it'll be part of the wraparound services that are part of UBE, because of course it will, to help people once they have access to some of these mainstream financial products to be able to maybe break some habits that have formed out of necessity, to be able to be smart about what loans to take on, what savings to make, and to make those investments for the long term in their life. But really, it's not about using the dollars. People are already using their dollars in the smartest way possible. They need more resources.
Absolutely.
This is why Emily's our Cleveland expert on poverty, because you can't state that enough, that there's no financial literacy for making $10,000 a year. I just don't flat out make enough.
Frankly, people are probably much better with their money than you are.
Exactly.
They're making those dollars stretch so
far. Yes, because when you have so little, you find ways to make ends meet. Understand the benefit system way better than any of us could ever understand it. But again, that's not a lever of change. Financial literacy, making more money is the lever.
But unlocking the ability to access some more traditional financial products is really important. Understanding things like compound interest, understanding things like, CDs.
Yes.
Now we have high interest rates, right? So where can you put your money to grow the best? These are not issues that people who are low income have ever had the opportunity to consider. And so supporting them in that way to help see their money grow would be really important.
And it depends on how you want to look at it. The private sector, when you have, you hit, as the bank likes to say, when you become in relationship with the bank at certain levels, they begin offering you the products that, are advantageous for you and them, again, to be able to have, what would it look like to elevate, a community like Central or Kinsman up to an average income of $50,000. All of a sudden now banks that are bringing money in at 0.004% and lending it back out somewhere between 2 and 24%, that opportunity becomes right there available at 71st and Kinsman, even though it's historically not been there.
Right. And Devin, this question says, will the businesses be shared so folks can support them? I'm imagining, since it's tied to public policy, they will be. But it sounds like there are some folks that are interested in going to patronize some of these businesses specifically because they are willing to do a program like this.
Yeah, we're we are going to do a better job, and UBE are going to do a better job of sharing the story that we've been building for the last 2 years. And so, yes, when we have all the businesses squared away and have those partners in tow and all ready to run the pilot, we would definitely share that with the community so they can come in and see in real time. Nothing tells better than the real life experience of looking at someone and be like, wow, this is what this pilot is doing right here in our Cleveland neighborhood. So yeah, when the opportunity comes, we'll definitely share out those businesses that we're partnering with.
And I imagine, because you are someone that is clearly very passionate about this, that potential participants have been consulted for this. But this question asked, how has that feedback from people that you've spoken to in the community been incorporated into the program?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing we did with support from the Gun Foundation, Cleveland Foundation, Deaconess Foundation, North Family Foundation, and in partnership with our previous fiscal sponsor, Burdenville Carr, we started with a human-centered design phase where we brought 40 of the most proximate voices into this conversation so that they can imprint on the design of UBE. So we brought in 20 Black women and contracted with them for their expertise, so paid them for their time, same way that anyone else gets paid for their time and expertise, and said, hey, this is what we've built up, and this is how we've designed this public policy solution. Tell us everything that's wrong with this. Do you think that this would be a solution for in your life? Do you think this would provide you with the agency necessary to navigate the needs and wants as you see for your individual life? And facilitated by Monique Inc. and Monique Williams, we got a resounding yes, which was a confident booster for us to continue this conversation. And hosted by Randy McShepard, we brought in 20 business owners to be able to 20 small business owners and partners and ask the exact same question. Would this solve the symptoms of poverty that show up in your business every day? As we thinking about one business owner talked about, like, hey, I have no problem paying people a certain wage. I just want them to be able to, have their own dollars, so they stop asking me for $20 on the Fridays that we're not able to, that are non-pay Fridays. And so how again, we solve that, okay, I made the investment one time with this one employee, and then they didn't pan out because they didn't have childcare, they didn't have transportation. Again, businesses, nonprofit, government, everyone's trying to solve that, but sometimes we dance around that solution that is directly tied to the main thing, keeping the main thing, which is wages.
Right. And we received several questions about universal basic income, UBI, UBE, UBI. So one of the questions was, how does UBE compare to more common wage tools like increasing minimum wages or more well-known, if experimental, tools like UBI, Universal Basic Income?
Yeah, I'll quote one of our advisors here, Dr. Derek Hamilton at the New School. We're not in competition. UBE and UBI are not in competition. I think there's a great movement right now to write and create better economic guarantees overall in our country. And so UBI is the guarantees that are not tied to work. UBE are the guarantees that are tied to work. And then some of the work that Dr. Derek Hamilton has done at the New School, our baby bonds are guarantees that are tied to wealth building. And so all three components of an individual life, guarantees not tied to work, guarantees tied to work, and wealth building are needed to have the agency and prosperity that folks are looking for in their life. So we are not in competition with UBI at all, and we look forward to running alongside the work that so many guaranteed income folks are doing. And we, in so many ways, have invited UBI folks into our work, having conversations with folks like Dr. Stacia West out of the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Derek Hamilton, and so many other people that are involved with the UBI and guaranteed income work.
And can either of you speak to how, because we had a conversation about, if we increase the wages for certain businesses, maybe it'll drive up the wages for other businesses, which when you mentioned bigger chains, maybe they can afford it, but we had a question about like local businesses, and as higher wages draw some employees away from other employers, is there concern that some employers may need to cut back on employees or even close down because they cannot afford to compete with subsidized wages? Either of you can speak to that? Okay.
Yes. I think what type of employees are we talking about would, I guess, be my next question to that. But again, think about the mom and pop shops that we would be subsidizing, the nonprofits, the churches, the true small businesses. We don't foresee a situation in which they would be competing. Again, that's why we're providing the subsidy directly to them so that they can compete, again, with the other folks that have historically chosen not to raise the wages. I think we saw in California recently that the minimum wage for fast food or food service counter workers is like $20 now, and then we saw burgers go up by like 25 cents. You know what I mean? Like there's capacity to do this. How can we nudge the private sector in some ways to ensure that that begins to happen?
Another question is, what supports are in place to help a business maintain the revenue necessary to continue paying the employees the amount received during the program?
Oh, I guess that one's for me.
Sure, whoever wants to answer.
About the specifics.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great question. So, again, it's going off the theoretical framework that if you pay people more, your business does better. Again, you're not having to rehire, retool, retrain individuals every 3 weeks, every 6 months. That's a cost savings. There's a cost to hiring, as all businesses, whether you're talking in the financial district, financial industry, nonprofit industry, everyone right now is, going through the hiring, the struggles of what it means to hire individuals. So if you're not spending the extra $10,000 to retrain someone, market the job, and do all those other types of things, what does it look like putting that into the salary of your employees to be able, as Emily said, retain that one individual?
Right. And one final question that we have from the audience is, how can the community get involved with this? Either of you. Or both
Please,
of you.
Devin.
Yeah, I guess that one's for me as well. I think the first step you can do is go to ubemployment.org and learn more about the work that we're doing. The amazing 14-member advisory committees, committee members that have supported this work and made it a true Cleveland groundswell of work that we've been doing over the past 2 years here. So go to our website, learn more about what we're doing, be on the lookout in the information that we'll be pumping out soon. Go to the United Way's website and learn through their partnership of what it means that, having a legacy institution like the United Way support us in this work that we've been going about doing. And just be on the lookout. Again, we're on a pathway to write better economic guarantees here in the country overall. There are many tools that we need to examine. There's many ways that we can, look at this. But as long as we keep the main thing is that people need to make enough money. I think we can solve some of those problems. So just be on the lookout for what's ahead for us in this work.
Wonderful. Well, as we near the end of our conversation, we have a pre-recorded message from Cleveland Councilmember Stephanie Howse-Jones, who recently introduced the legislation for the city to financially support the 2-year UBE, Universal Basic Employment Pilot Program.
Greetings, beautiful people. I'm Councilwoman Stephanie Howse-Jones of Cleveland's Ward 7, one of the sponsors of the UBE pilot here in the city of Cleveland. I hope that from this conversation, you all learned all about UBE, the guaranteed jobs pilot we are running here in our city, and how we are going to utilize our $600,000 investment in partnership from Cleveland City Council and the administration, along with the United Way of Greater Cleveland, to make this a reality. We are putting forth a bold solution to really transform our city and really put up a great fight to really reduce the level of poverty that we have here in our city. Hopefully you will join us. Please connect with the team members at the United Way of Greater Cleveland, as well as Universal Basic Employment. We have so much work to do. We know we can solve the problem of poverty. And with your help and your support, we're going to make this a reality. Thank you all so much for your interest. And we look forward to your partnership in the days, weeks, and years ahead.
Thank you, Councilwoman Howse-Jones, for that statement. I'm going to let you guys make brief final comments and final takeaways from our conversation before we close out here.
Sure. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me here to be a part of this conversation. When we think about programs like Universal Basic Employment, they are absolutely transformative for the people who are involved in them. And we have enough poverty in this community that we need all the solutions we can get. Great. But I would really encourage people to consider to think about those who aren't able to participate in this program and the thousands and hundreds of thousands of people that will still be living in poverty. And what are some of the systemic things that we can do to try and improve conditions for many more people within our community?
Thank you, Emily. Devin?
Yeah, no, this has been a great conversation. I believe one of many that as we continue on this movement to restore agency back to the nearly 40 million Americans living in poverty and dignify historically low wage work. Again, Cleveland businesses, neighborhoods, and all across the country, we're doing very, very hard work of solving poverty and also dealing with the symptoms of poverty. We're on a pathway, with the help of the United Way of Greater Cleveland, on a dynamic advisory committee in Cleveland as a whole to accomplish our goal of eliminating poverty. And I look forward to having you all a part of this journey.
Wonderful. Thank you both. I appreciate it. And thank you for everyone who joined us. At this point, I will turn it back over to Sharon to close out our event.
Thank you, Abbey Marshall, Devin Cotten, Emily Campbell, and Councilwoman Stephanie Howse-Jones for today's conversation. Thank you to Ideastream Public Media and WOVU 95.9 FM for their support. And thank you for joining us today and being a part of the dialogue on this important topic to our community. Information on our next panel discussion will be available on United Way's website at unitedwaycleveland.org. All community conversations are complimentary and open to all. Have a good afternoon.